The call came just after midnight. A crash, a siren, someone sobbing into the phone. At first I thought it was a mistake, a wrong number, a drunk dial. But then I heard her voice, fractured and too familiar. "Rachel," she whimpered. "It's bad. It's really bad." That was how it began. Not the accident, not the betrayal, but the unraveling. "My name is Rachel Monroe, and 3 hours earlier, my sister stole my car and drove it straight through the life I'd spent a decade trying to hold together." Danielle was 6 years younger, but somehow always older in damage. She carried chaos, like perfume, subtle, intoxicating, and always someone else's problem. Growing up, people said she had energy, spirit, fire. What they meant was, Danielle did what she wanted, and someone else paid the bill. That someone, for the last 10 years, was me. I was the dependable one, the teacher, the planner, the one who paid her rent when she was 2 months behind, who called the credit card company to negotiate her balance, who slipped her my spare key, and said, "Only if it's urgent." I said it knowing she would take it as permission because that's what I'd trained her to do. I was the net beneath her every fall, and nets don't get thanked. They get walked on. That afternoon, I had left for a weekend seminar in Palo Alto. Before leaving, I'd parked my silver Honda Civic, the car I bought after a decade of saving, budgeting, driving hand-me-downs, right in front of my apartment. I remember locking it twice. I remember glancing back and feeling a strange, unplaceable unease. I remember thinking, she wouldn't. 3 hours later, she did. The message came casually. "Took the Civic. You weren't using it anyway." At first, I laughed, out loud. Then I read it again. My stomach went cold. I called her. No answer. I called again. She picked up on the third ring. "Why did you take my car?" "You weren't using it," she said. "We're just heading up to the lake house. Relax." "You mean the cabin your friend's boyfriend owns?" A pause. "Yeah. So what?" "You didn't ask." Danielle's voice turned sharp. "You act like I jacked a Rolls Royce." "No," I said quietly. "Just the only thing I own that still has value." She hung up. That should have been the moment I made a decision. That should have been the end. But I waited. I told myself she'd bring it back, that it wasn't worth the fight. That's how it always started, with silence, at 12:14 a.m., silence shattered. "Rachel, there was a deer. I swerved. I hit the guardrail. It's totaled." I sat upright in my hotel bed, the room still dark, the glow from my screen too harsh. "Are you okay?" "I think so. My wrist hurts." "But the car?" She sucked in air. "The cops are here. Can you tell them it's fine? That you gave me permission?" I paused. "No." Silence. "You always do this," she exploded. "You leave me to deal with everything." "You are everything," I said. "Every unpaid bill, every voicemail from Mom, every missed call that starts with, 'Danielle needs your help.'" I'm done. "You'll regret this," she snapped. I didn't respond. At 6 a.m., 2 officers knocked on my door. I was back home, the seminar abandoned, anxiety driving me faster than traffic laws allowed. They were polite, efficient. "Ms. Monroe, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Your sister claims you stole her car." I blinked. "What?" "She's filed a report stating that the vehicle is registered under her, and that you took it while she was asleep, that you were intoxicated, that you crashed it, then left her at the scene." What?" "We'll need you to come with us to clarify a few things." My mind was trying to catch up. "The car is mine." "Do you have registration?" I handed it over. He studied it. "Thank you, but we still need your statement at the station." Inside, the room, cold and too white, I sat staring at a printed report. Danielle's words were surreal, her signature neat, her story airtight. She even mentioned where I'd allegedly hidden the keys. The part that shook me most, the witness section, Grace Monroe, Leonard Monroe. My parents. They had signed statements confirming her version. It wasn't just betrayal, it was choreography, precision. They knew exactly how to cast me. Cold, rigid Rachel, jealous of her radiant sister. My father once said, "Danielle needs more help than you do." I thought he meant emotionally. I didn't realize he meant protection. Strategy. Was shaking, but I didn't cry. That's when I remembered something, a nothing detail. A line from Danielle days earlier. "You deleted those old messages, right? From last year?" I hadn't. I never do. I'd archived everything, every Cash App receipt, every desperate text, every "I'll pay you back" lie. Including a message from 4 days ago. "Took your car. Didn't think you'd mind." I handed my phone to the officer. He scrolled, his expression shifting. "We'll need to take a statement," he said. I nodded. When I returned home, my phone buzzed nonstop. "Mom, why are you making this worse?" "Dad, handle this quietly. We can't survive a court case." I scrolled back up, saw a message I'd missed from 3 days ago. From my mother. "Don't overreact if Danielle needs the car. You know she's had a rough month." I stared at it, something clicking. That wasn't concern. That was preemptive. Cover. An alibi. I hadn't noticed it then, but now it burned through the screen. That night, I sat in silence. I replayed every memory, every Christmas I paid for, every grocery bill I covered, every insult my parents deflected with, "She's just sensitive." And I decided something. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I'd wait. Because sometimes the most dangerous move isn't to strike back. It's to step aside and let the fire consume what it must. Danielle had drawn the match. My silence would be the gasoline. They didn't knock. They banged. 3 sharp, deliberate hits on the door that sliced through the morning quiet like a warning shot. I had been awake for hours, sitting motionless on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. At nothing. I already knew something was coming. I just didn't know how deliberate it would be. When I opened the door, 2 officers stood there, clean uniforms, calm eyes. The taller one adjusted the radio on his shoulder and said, "Ms. Rachel Monroe?" I nodded. "We'd like to speak with you regarding a report involving a stolen vehicle. May we come in?" It wasn't a question. I stepped aside. Inside, the younger officer took a notepad from his pocket. "Your sister, Danielle Monroe, claims you took her car without permission. She says you were intoxicated, crashed it, and abandoned her at the scene." I blinked. "Her car?" the taller officer interjected. "She's listed as the complainant. She states the vehicle is under her name." "That's incorrect. The car is mine." I reached for the drawer where I kept my files and pulled out the registration. "It's registered to me. Purchased 3 years ago. Financed in my name. I have the loan documents if you'd like to see them too." They took the paper without a word, eyes scanning the lines. The younger one spoke again. "Can you tell us your whereabouts last night?" "I was in Palo Alto for work. Returned home at 5 a.m. this morning after I received a call from Danielle, saying she'd been in an accident with my car. She never had permission to use it. She says you entered her apartment, took her keys, and left while she was asleep." I paused. That detail, her apartment, her keys, was too precise, too clean. She wasn't just covering her mistake. She was building a story, a structure, and someone was helping her do it. "Do you have that call recorded?" the younger one asked. "No, but I have her text from earlier, the one where she admitted taking the car without permission. Let me show you." I scrolled through my phone until I found it, heart steady now, blood cold. I handed the screen over. The officer read it. "Took the Civic. Didn't think you'd mind. You weren't using it anyway." Smiley face. He didn't say anything, but I saw his jaw tighten, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. That small signal. That told me everything I needed to know. They were beginning to realize who they were dealing with. "We'll need to take a formal statement," the taller one said. "You can follow us to the station." I nodded. I didn't ask if I could change clothes. I didn't ask how long it would take. I just grabbed my coat and locked the door behind me. The interrogation room was smaller than I expected. The lights buzzed faintly above, the walls off-white and too clean, like someone had tried to scrub away the truth but left behind a stain no bleach could touch. They sat me down, recorded the statement, asked questions in a rhythm meant to trap rather than clarify, but I didn't flinch. I answered every question with sharp precision. I told them the truth, not the emotional version, not the desperate sister narrative, but the facts. Clear, quiet, indisputable. And then they handed me the printed version of Danielle's report. I wasn't ready. She said I had a history of unstable behavior. She said I'd screamed at her weeks ago about money, that I had threatened to make her pay. She described our relationship as volatile, manipulative, dangerous. I scanned further. Witnesses. Grace Monroe. Leonard Monroe. I stopped breathing. My mother and father. The same people who used to tell me I was the strong one. The same people who said Danielle just needed more love. The same people who called me in tears last month because Danielle had overdrafted her checking account and needed $600 or she'd lose her apartment. The same people I had wired the money to, without question, without condition. They had signed statements, not vague ones, not half-hearted, full affirmations of Danielle's account. They corroborated everything. They claimed I'd shown up to family dinner last weekend agitated, that I was obsessed with Danielle's lack of contribution to the family. But here's the thing. I hadn't been at dinner. I was in San Jose that weekend. I had the receipts, hotel records, emails, a time-stamped parking stub. I hadn't seen them in over 3 weeks. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fabrication, complete fiction, orchestrated with intention. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't about the car. This wasn't even about Danielle. This was about history, about the stories families tell when they need someone to blame. I had spent my whole life being their certainty, their solution. And now that I refused, I had become their scapegoat. The interrogator folded the file closed. "We'll be following up with your sister again. For now, you're free to go, but please remain reachable." As I stood, he added, almost as an afterthought, "You're remarkably composed." I looked him in the eye. "You learn to be when the people who taught you right from wrong start lying under oath." Outside the station, the sun had risen. A bland, pale light that offered no warmth. I stood on the curb, phone vibrating in my pocket. I didn't check it. I already knew what the messages said. Apologies disguised as scoldings. Concern dressed up as guilt-tripping. There would be no admissions. Just more pressure to keep quiet. To protect the narrative. I walked home instead of calling a ride. Every step, I thought of the phrase my mother used to say when Danielle would mess up, after a broken window, a failed semester, a near DUI. "She doesn't mean to, Rachel. She just needs someone to catch her." I used to believe that. Now I saw it for what it was. She didn't need a net. She needed an audience, and I was done playing the safety act. I didn't go home to cry. I went home to plan, because Danielle had set the scene. But I still held the truth, and I was about to make it center stage. I didn't check my phone when I left the station. I already knew what I'd find. Messages from people who taught me how to obey, not question. I walked through the front door of my apartment, locked it behind me, and dropped my bag on the floor. I stood in the dark hallway for a full minute before I exhaled. I wasn't tired. I was sharpened. The first message came from my mother. "Mom, Please don't make this worse. Danielle is scared. We need to handle this quietly. I read it twice. The word we clung to my skin like something venomous. I hadn't realized until then how often we meant you. You fix it. You cover it. You bend. The next message proved it. Dad. Keep this in the family. You dragging this out only damages us all. I didn't respond. I let them sit in silence while they waited for the obedient daughter to blink first. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, a woman named Marcia Noland, a defense attorney I'd met through a former student's custody case. She had once told me, over cheap coffee in a silent courtroom hallway, if the day ever comes when you're tired of being the rational one, call me. I specialize in rational women who finally snap. She answered on the second ring. I didn't give her backstory. I didn't dramatize it. My sister falsely reported me for stealing my own car. My parents are backing her statement. I need representation. Her voice didn't waver. How soon can you meet me? Now. At her office, Marcia wore a blazer the color of blood and eyes that hadn't missed a trick in 20 years. Sat across from her and told her everything. How Danielle took my car, how I refused to lie for her after the crash, how the police showed up with a report that read like a script. I showed her the text. Took your Civic. Didn't think you'd mind. Marcia scrolled, then smiled. She underestimated you. She always has. No, she said, locking eyes with me. She counted on you being silent. There's a difference. That's... When I showed her the most important message, one I hadn't registered fully before, a text from my mother, sent before Danielle crashed the car. It was short. If Danielle needs the car, don't make it a thing. You know she's had a hard year. I had dismissed it. At the time, it sounded like another preemptive guilt trip. But now, in this context, with police reports and fabricated witness statements, it was something else entirely. She laid groundwork, Marcia said. She softened the edges of the lie before Danielle told it. That text is cover. And if she sent that before the crash, it means they were already coordinating a version of this. I stared at the screen, numb. They planned this before the accident even happened? Or they expected one? That's when it hit me. 2 weeks ago, my father had called out of the blue. He asked if I had tightened up my insurance recently. At the time, I thought it was small talk. Concern, maybe. Now I saw it for what it was. He was gauging the fallout. They hadn't just taken Danielle's side. They had architected the ground she would stand on. I sat back in the chair, arms crossed over my chest. What would you do if it were you? Marcia smiled, just slightly. I'd stop being polite, and I'd stop calling them family. The next day, she filed a formal counterstatement. Included, with it were screenshots of Danielle's text admitting to taking the car, insurance documents with my name, and a list of timeline events, all built with the kind of brutal clarity that burns lies alive. But that wasn't the moment that shifted everything. That came 3 days later, when Marcia subpoenaed Danielle's financial records. There it was, a $2,000 deposit from my mother's account to Danielle's, dated the morning after the crash. Memo line. For loyalty. I remember reading that and laughing, sharp and dry. Not because it was funny, but because it was so clean, so transactional. I wasn't the daughter. I was the insurance policy, the bargaining chip. And Danielle wasn't the broken little sister. She was the enforcer, paid and willing. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I waited. That weekend, I went to the family home under the pretense of clearing the air. My parents were too relieved to question my sudden change in tone. My father opened the door with a cautionary glance. My mother offered me tea. Danielle wasn't there. We sat in the living room like actors rehearsing lines. I didn't ask about the police report. I didn't ask about the money. I asked about nothing. My mother touched my arm, a gentle pat, and said, "You've always been the stable one. That's why this has to fall on you." I looked at her hand. I looked at the tea. Then I smiled. That evening, Marcia submitted a secondary motion to include the bank transfer as evidence of coercion and conspiracy. She attached my mother's text, the audio recording I had taken at the house, legal in California, and the full police complaint. This wasn't just perjury, it was calculated manipulation. The last message I got from my father came that night. "You don't need to do this. You're better than revenge." I didn't reply. Because this was never revenge, it was reclamation, and the next move was mine. When I knocked on the front door of my parents' house, I already knew they wouldn't be surprised to see me. That was their specialty, expecting me to come home, to smooth things over, to be the grown-up in a family full of carefully curated fragility. Grace Monroe opened the door with a practiced look of concern painted across her face. The lines were too precise. I had seen them before, usually right before she told me how I'd disappointed someone by saying no. "You look tired," she said softly, stepping aside. "I am," I replied. But I didn't come to talk about that. Inside, the living room hadn't changed. Same cream walls, same crystal bowl full of keys, same framed photo of Danielle and me at ages 11 and 17. Me in a valedictorian sash, Danielle with ice cream on her nose, both of us pretending to laugh. My father entered, Ty still nodded, as if the truth hadn't touched him yet. "Rachel?" he said, sitting on the edge of the armrest like always. "Let's not do this." "Do what?" I asked, calm. "Ask why you helped fabricate a criminal report against me?" He exhaled through his nose. "That's not what happened. I have the statement, your signature. You said I broke into Danielle's apartment and took her keys while she was sleeping. It's what she told us." I turned to my mother. "And the $2,000 you sent her the next morning? Did she tell you to add 'for loyalty' to the memo line?" Her face froze. That small, sharp flinch in her eye, just for a second. Then it was gone, composed again. She was in trouble. She needed help. "So you bought her silence, or her lies." "No, Rachel," she said, voice dropping. "We just did what we had to do." To protect her? To protect us. My mother set her teacup down with care. "You've always been stronger. You can survive this." It was such a simple sentence. Quiet, almost complimentary, but it landed like a knife, the kind that cuts without breaking skin. For years, I'd carried that compliment like armor, stronger, the dependable one, the selfless one. But now I saw it clearly. It had always been code for disposable. I leaned forward slightly. "Did you know about the plan before she crashed the car?" My father blinked. "What plan?" "She took the car. She totaled it. You both backed her story before I even gave mine. That only happens if there's already a script." No answer. Silence from the people who once told me I was too intense, too suspicious, too cold. And now, suddenly, I was too aware. "You both believed I'd roll over," I said. "Like I always do, that I'd eat the charges to save face for the family." Grace stood. "You're twisting this into something it's not." "No," I said. "I'm seeing it for what it finally is." I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I stood up, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. My father called after me. "We don't have to go to court. You can pull the complaint. Settle it privately." "Why would I do that?" "For the family." At the threshold, I turned around. "You think this is about court? About money? About Danielle?" They both stared at me, expectant. "It's not," I said. "This is about memory, about whose version gets to survive." That night, Marcia filed an amendment to our complaint, conspiracy and coercion, backed by a paper trail, text evidence, and the bank transaction. She warned me this would escalate, that they'd get desperate, that people like my parents didn't go down quietly. She was right. The next day, Danielle appeared on local news. Not an interview, not a statement, an accusation. A reporter outside the courthouse, microphone in hand. Danielle in a hoodie and sunglasses, voice quivering as she described, growing up with a sister who always resented her. How I used money as control. How she had finally found the courage to speak out. It was theater, but the kind that sells. That same clip landed on social media and began to circulate. Comments poured in. Strangers choosing sides with hashtags. Armchair analysts dissecting my expression in graduation photos, wondering aloud if the uptight sister could have been abusive all along. I didn't flinch. I saved every frame, every word. Because the performance was overproduced, too polished. Someone was coaching her. Marcia confirmed it 2 days later. A publicist had been hired using an account linked to Grace Monroe's charity, Foundation, an account I had helped set up 5 years ago when my mother said she wanted to do something meaningful now that the girls are grown. I had built the platform they were using to crucify me. That night, I found myself rewatching a family video from 15 years ago, Thanksgiving. Danielle spilling wine on the rug. My mother laughing as I cleaned it. My father joking, "Rach is always the fixer." Back then, I thought it was love. Now I know better. They weren't praising me. They were preparing me for this, and I would no longer play the part. The first real fracture came quietly. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't Danielle screaming or my mother accusing me of betrayal. It was an email, no subject line. Just a forwarded message from a name I didn't recognize. Kay Morrissey, HR manager at Glimmer Consulting, Danielle's employer. It contained a single sentence. Please confirm whether the police report involving Ms. Danielle Monroe is active and under investigation. It was addressed to Marcia, my lawyer, not me. Somehow the fallout had found its way to the surface. Corporate background checks, legal flags, a simple data crawl connecting Danielle's name to mine in the court's digital system. I didn't respond. Marcia did with a concise verification. Yes, pending investigation, grand theft auto and false police report. Rachel Monroe is my client. Danielle Monroe is the accused. 3 hours later, Danielle's job was gone. She didn't call me. She called my parents. And they, in turn, came to my doorstep. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the sky thick with California haze. I saw their car pull up, Grace in the passenger seat, Leonard gripping the wheel like the steering. Colum owed him answers. I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway. You've made your point, my father said before I could speak. I haven't made anything, I replied. You chose the direction. I'm just following the road. Grace stepped forward. Her eyes had always been good at summoning sympathy. They used to make me feel guilty even when I was right. But now I looked for the calculation behind them, and I found it, coiled like a patient snake. She lost her job, Rachel, she said. She's being evicted. What do you expect her to do now? She can tell the truth, I answered. Leonard's voice hardened. Do you want her in jail? Is that what this is about? Proving you're right by ruining her life? No, I said quietly. It's about not letting her ruin mine, he scoffed. We raised you better than this. You raised me to keep quiet. That stopped him. Grace touched her husband's arm. Maybe we can fix this if we just talk to the DA. Maybe if you withdraw. I'm not withdrawing, I said. I've spent my entire life doing that. And then, the first twist of the knife. My father said, You're not the only one with something to lose here, Rachel. It was subtle, calculated, not a threat, but a preview. I kept my face still. You're right, I said, which is why I have nothing left to give. They didn't expect that. Grace's mouth opened, then closed again. Leonard just looked past me, as if the daughter they'd spent 3 decades pretending to understand had vanished entirely. That night, the second fracture came. Danielle texted me, Not to apologize. Not even to blame, but to beg. Danielle, I need you to call them off. I can't afford court. I'm already gone. You win. Can we just stop? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened a new email. I sent it to Marcia. Subject, next step. Body. I want every record, every transaction between them and Danielle. Pull everything. And that's when we uncovered the third fracture, a foundation. Grace and Leonard Monroe had a wellness trust set up in Danielle's name, quietly funded over the last 3 years. No paper trail leading back to income, but large transfers from the foundation tied to Leonard's former school district's discretionary fund. Public money, misappropriated. What I thought was a rescue mission for a reckless sister was actually a cover-up for something much larger. Danielle wasn't just the golden child, she was the proxy, the funnel, the fragile scapegoat hiding the larger theft under the surface. And now that scrutiny had cracked the mirror, the district was asking questions. 2 days later, Leonard Monroe was suspended pending investigation. The phone didn't stop buzzing that night. I turned it off. I stood in the kitchen, watching the streetlights reflect off my empty carport. The Civic was gone, towed, totaled, wrecked. But its absence had revealed more than I ever expected. For years, I thought I was covering for Danielle. But the truth was, I was cleaning up a story bigger than her. And now it was collapsing. Not because I fought back, but because, for once, I stopped covering. It came in a brown envelope, unmarked, hand-delivered, no return address. I found it wedged between junk mail and a utility bill, so ordinary it nearly went into the recycling, but something about the weight of it, the way the paper felt too thick for spam, made me open it. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no label, just a plain USB wrapped in the silence of a calculated gesture. I didn't plug it in right away. Not because I was scared, but because I already knew, in some deep, unspoken place, that this wasn't a threat. It was a weapon. When I finally opened the video file on my laptop, the screen went black for 3 seconds. Then it lit up with the grainy resolution of a phone recording. The footage was angled slightly downward, taken from what looked like a mounted shelf camera in a living room I recognized instantly. My parents' house. Grace was seated on the couch, legs crossed, clutching a mug she didn't drink from. Leonard paced behind her. Danielle sat in the corner, chewing the edge of her thumbnail like a child waiting to be told what to do. My father's voice was the first to cut through the silence. If Rachel doesn't drop it, you know what to say. Danielle didn't respond. Grace set her mug down and leaned forward. You just have to sound afraid. Say she's been controlling, that you were scared of how she'd react if you told her about the car. Danielle's voice. You want me to say she hit me? Say what you need to say, Leonard answered. Just make it real. The room in the footage fell quiet again. You could hear the refrigerator humming, a dog barking in the distance. Then Danielle nodded. She always looks guilty when I cry. Grace laughed. Light. Almost fond. I stopped the video. My hands didn't shake, my breath didn't hitch. I just stared at the screen as my mind rearranged years of memory like a puzzle. Flipped over. The pieces had always been wrong side up, just shades of gray, indistinct. Now they had color. Clarity. They hadn't panicked. They had planned. I forwarded the file to Marcia with a single line. Use this when ready. She called me 20 minutes later. Who gave this to you? She asked. No idea. Marcia was silent. For a moment. Then, this changes everything. It did. Until now, their story had been slippery but deniable, bias wrapped in plausible loyalty. But this? This was coordination. This was conspiracy. This was the exact thing they swore they would never do. Caught on video, defining every lie. The next morning, we filed a motion to admit new evidence into the case: audio-visual proof of witness tampering, perjury planning, and emotional coercion. The DA reviewed it within 48 hours. A formal inquiry into Danielle's statement was opened. The detective who took my statement called me in again, not to interrogate me, but to apologize. He didn't say the words directly, but his face did. 2 days later, I received a call from the school district. Leonard Monroe had been placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. The cracks had become fault lines. And then, just as things began to tip in my favor, the most unexpected message arrived. Danielle, it wasn't supposed to go this far. Please. I didn't mean for them to use me like this. I thought they just needed time. I didn't know they were setting you up. I swear. I stared at the message for a full minute. She was lying, of course. Or maybe she wasn't. The truth had become fluid in our family. Whatever version floated above water was the one that survived. But one sentence caught me. They used me. Not I made a mistake. Not I'm sorry. She was positioning herself again, not as the one who lit the match, but as another victim of the flame. I didn't respond. Instead, I asked Marcia to dig deeper into the trust account. If Danielle had been a pawn, I needed to know who had moved the pieces. And that's when we discovered a second account, one in Grace's name, linked to a donor shell from her charity fund. It had funneled small amounts to a series of service providers, a crisis PR consultant, a reputation management firm, even a private investigator. My mother hadn't just protected Danielle, she had built a fortress around her, brick by manipulative brick, and now one of those bricks had fallen out. Whoever sent me the footage had cracked the foundation from inside. I reviewed the video again, this time watching their faces frame by frame. Danielle, anxious but obedient. Grace, instructive. Leonard, silent but absolute. What disturbed me wasn't the lie. It was how easily it came to them. Like they'd rehearsed this before. Like it was a role they'd played with someone else once. Maybe with each other. Maybe with me. It was never about Danielle's recklessness. It was about control, about image, about crafting a story where the broken daughter stayed soft and sad, and the strong daughter never made it out without being called cruel. But I wasn't cruel. Was awake. And now they were the ones standing in the light. The courthouse was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in the way sound traveled. Every footstep echoed longer than it should. Every whisper felt louder. The kind of place designed to expose you, strip your story down until only evidence remained. And that morning, I had evidence. I had truth. I had the footage. What I didn't have was certainty about how far they would go to keep the lie alive. Danielle walked in flanked by her attorney, a man too young to fully grasp the web he'd been dragged into. She looked pale, not fragile, calculated. Her hair was pulled back in a way that suggested effort to appear composed, like someone trying to win over a jury before the judge even entered. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on me. I didn't look away. I wanted her to see what she'd made, who she'd made. Grace and Leonard entered minutes later. No contact, no acknowledgement. But I saw the way Grace's hand hovered near her purse, like she expected me to confront her, as if she still believed I had something to prove. I didn't. I had already won the moment I stopped caring whether they understood me. Marcia sat, beside me, calm as ever. She whispered without turning her head. They're bluffing. The motion to dismiss was dead on arrival. The judge has already reviewed the video. I nodded once. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered. Formalities passed in a blur. Charges read, parties confirmed, procedural acknowledgments. Then came the motion hearing. Danielle's lawyer stood to argue that the video was inadmissible due to unclear sourcing and potential manipulation. Marcia didn't even rise. She slid a printed affidavit across the table, signed by an anonymous whistleblower, a former employee of the reputation firm Grace had hired. A digital timestamp, metadata. The chain of custody was clean, untouchable. The judge reviewed it silently. Then, motion to suppress is denied. This recording will remain on record. Danielle shifted in her seat. I could almost hear her breathing. Change. She wasn't prepared for this. None of them were. They thought silence would be their shield, that I would bend like before, that I would break if forced to drag them through public mud. But here's the thing about truth. Once it's out, you can't put it back. You can't out-PR it. You can't bury it under grace and pity and manipulated family dinners. When the footage played, there was no sound in the courtroom except the recording itself. Grace's voice suggesting what Danielle should say. Leonard telling her to make it real. Danielle agreeing, eyes cast low, not a hint of hesitation in her tone. Therese. Video ended, still silence. Then the judge spoke again. Ms. Danielle Monroe, do you wish to amend your statement? Her attorney leaned toward her, whispering something urgent. She stared ahead, unmoving. Finally, her voice cracked. I want to speak to the prosecutor. The judge nodded. Court will recess for 30 minutes. That was the moment it shifted, not the trial, not the public perception, the dynamic. Danielle looked at me as the room cleared, and I saw something I hadn't seen since we were children. Not regret, not apology, fear, not of prison, not of consequences, but of what came after, who she'd be when no one could spin the story anymore, when she'd have to explain not just what she did, but why she thought she could. 30 minutes. Later, she took a deal. Pleaded guilty to filing a false report. Charges of conspiracy against Grace and Leonard were referred to the DA's office for further investigation. It wasn't the handcuffs. It wasn't the headlines. It was the first time someone said you're responsible and made it stick. Leonard left without speaking. Grace tried. As I walked past her in the hallway, she reached out lightly. Rachel? I stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. Maybe she didn't know how. Or maybe she finally realized that the version of me they raised no longer existed. Said nothing. Just turned and kept walking. Outside, the sun had begun to break through the overcast sky. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Like something had settled after years of shaking loose. Back home, I poured a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop. One last message had come in from Danielle. You burned it all down. I stared at it for a long time. Then, typed one word. No. And hit send. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped pretending the house wasn't already on fire. Under the washed-out morning light of Sacramento, I walked into the police station not as a victim, not even as a witness, but as a force that no longer flinched. I wasn't there to give another statement. I wasn't there to cry or beg. I was there to finalize a counter-complaint. Fraud, defamation, witness tampering. The list was long, precise, and for once, entirely in my control. Marcia met me outside, a folder tucked beneath her arm. You ready for what comes next? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I watched a bird land on the squad car antenna, then take off again. It already started, I said. Inside, we handed everything over. The flash drive, the financial records, the anonymous whistleblower's signed affidavit, the chain of transfers from the school district to the wellness trust. My family hadn't just lied. They'd stolen, laundered, built entire reputations on the illusion of victimhood, and for decades, I'd unknowingly helped them sustain it. Until now. As we walked back out, Marcia's phone rang. She didn't answer, just read the screen, then glanced at me. Your father's attorney. I think they're about to make an offer. I didn't ask what kind. I already knew. When pride loses power, silence becomes currency. That night, I returned home to an envelope slid under my front door. No address, no stamp, just my name, handwritten. Inside was a letter, not typed, not from a lawyer, but in Grace's looping, elegant cursive. Rachel, we didn't expect you to go this far. You've made your point. If you walk away now, maybe we can find a way back to being a family again. Danielle is fragile. Leonard is humiliated. I'm tired. Maybe you are too. You don't have to carry this anymore. We're still your blood. No apology. No ownership. Just leverage dressed as sentiment. I didn't respond. Instead, I slipped the letter into the same file where I kept the court documents. Evidence. Nothing more. But that message had a second layer, one that only hit me when I reread the last line, "We're still your blood," as if that alone entitled them to my silence. They had always counted on that, on my reluctance to burn the bridge completely, on the guilt that had been stitched into me from the moment I was old enough to say no. But I had learned something in the courtroom. The blood they kept invoking hadn't protected me. It had shackled me. And I was done mistaking inheritance for loyalty. 2 days later, the DA filed formal charges against Leonard Monroe: embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud the school district, obstruction of justice. His retirement was revoked, pension frozen. The school board issued a press release condemning his conduct. Grace disappeared from public view. Danielle, under the terms of her deal, avoided jail, but was sentenced to 18 months of probation, community, service, and mandatory therapy. She moved out of state within the week, and I went back to my classroom. Some expected me to take a break, to process, to heal. But standing in front of 25 seventh graders, watching their faces light up when I explained metaphors through music lyrics, gave me more clarity than any therapist's couch ever could. One afternoon, as class ended, a girl stayed behind. Quiet, bright, always watching. She stepped up to my desk and said, "You're strong, Miss Monroe. My mom says you're the kind of woman who survives anything." I smiled. "Your mom's smart." The girl hesitated. "Do people always try to take things from people like you?" I didn't flinch. Only once. As I locked up that evening, I received one final message, a private account. No profile picture, just a sentence. "You should have stayed quiet." No name, but I knew the cadence. I typed my reply slowly. "You should have picked someone who couldn't read between the lines." Then I blocked the sender. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't closure. It was something colder, sharper, reclamation. They wanted to believe I was still that quiet girl in the background, doing the emotional labor, absorbing damage so the family could keep its shape. But the truth was, I had never broken. I had simply changed, and I wasn't finished. The apartment was quiet. Not the kind of silence that used to suffocate me, but the kind that expands around you when the noise finally leaves. For good. I poured tea with steady hands. I had stopped flinching at my own thoughts. The ghosts in this place had names: Danielle, Grace, Leonard, but they no longer had power. They were no longer residents. They were footnotes. 3 weeks had passed since the final ruling. Leonard's name had been removed from the district website. Grace had vanished into voluntary retreat. Danielle was gone, off to some state, where no one knew her face. Where maybe she could spin a new version of her story, one that didn't include me. That was fine. I had no interest in her redemption arc. What surprised me most wasn't the fallout. It was the stillness after, the absence of obligation. I wasn't waking up with dread. I wasn't rehearsing phone conversations in my head. I wasn't explaining myself to people who were never listening. I wasn't bleeding into the cracks of other people's comfort anymore. I was, for the first time, mine. I stood in front of my mirror. Same face, same hands, same tired eyes, but different beneath it. Calmer, not softer, just real. That morning, I received a package from an unknown sender. Inside, a framed photo of our family from years ago. I remembered the day, Christmas probably. The smiles were tight. My arm had been around Danielle. She hadn't returned the gesture. I hadn't noticed that detail before. Tucked in the frame was a note. "Don't forget where you come from." I burned it, not in rage, not in dramatics. I lit a match over the sink and watched it curl into itself, turn to ash, like all things that no longer serve. That night, I recorded something. Just for me at first. A way to archive what I'd lived. But as the words came, I realized someone out there needed to hear it. Maybe many someones. People like me. People who kept giving until they disappeared in someone else's narrative. So I spoke, clear and deliberate, like I do when I teach. My name is Rachel Monroe. For most of my life, I was the older sister, the fixer, the sacrifice, the one who paid the rent, cleared the debt, gave rides, lent hope, and swallowed insult after insult in silence. I did it in the name of love, of duty, of being the good one. Until one day I realized they weren't asking me to be good. They were asking me to be complicit, to stay quiet while they rewrote the truth in their favor, at my expense. And when I refused, they turned on me. They lied. They gaslit. They nearly destroyed everything I'd built. But they failed. Because I remembered something they never expected I would, who I am when no one's telling me who I have to be. I looked at the camera. The silence after was heavy. I didn't edit it out. I wanted the breath between pain and power to be there, raw, unfiltered. I closed the video with a message. If you're watching this and you've been taught that family means keeping secrets that hurt you, I'm here to say, no, it doesn't. You are not disloyal for telling the truth. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. Sometimes, the strongest love you can give is the love you give to yourself when you walk away from those who use blood as a weapon. Don't let guilt hold you hostage. Don't wait for the apology. Build your exit. Write your version. And never, ever look back. The upload bar crawled slowly. I stared at it until it turned green, and in that moment, I wasn't just a teacher. I was a warning, a map, a mirror, to every Rachel out there. I see you. And if this story resonated with you, if you felt even one breath of your own pain echoed here, then let's keep this conversation going. Subscribe to the channel, support the stories that matter, and help us keep telling the ones no one else dares to. Your truth deserves to be heard. See you in the next one.